MILPA presentation.
Like we always do about this time.
The wind comes in four corners, four directions, four colors. And death rides on four horsemen. A black snake with some black tank. How much money do these companies need to make?
Buenas tardes, everybody. It's your Milpa Sencali once again, bringing you another netcast. This one is featuring another one of our maestros, and he has a lot to say, so I'm not going to consume too much more time up here, and I'm going to go ahead and allow him the opportunity to introduce himself, while at the same time saying thank you so much for being here with us today.
Okay, thank you. It's an honor to be here, this part of the world. My name is Isaac Alvarez Cardenas. I'm a son of a Comanche Apache woman, Aurora, a Tapilamquahutecan father, Dan, who's a World War II veteran, a liberator of Italy. I come from San Antonio, Texas. We call it Yanawana, land of spirit waters, commonly known as San Antonio. I'm a husband of my wife of 39 years now, Sylvia Ann, my high school sweetheart. And we have two sons, Michael Isaac Whitecliff and Jason Adam Blackcliff, who married a beautiful young woman, Marissa, and gave us two beautiful grandchildren, Nicholas and Kylie Annabella. And I also work in San Antonio. I live in the inner city west side of San Antonio, near the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. I was raised, grew up. I play there, I work there. We have a home there. Sylvia Ann and I, we were both raised in that neighborhood. She's a retired school teacher of 33 years, and I'm reaching almost time to retirement, but I work with an agency called American Indians of Texas at the Spanish Colonial Missions, which is a nonprofit legal entity of the Tapilamquahutecan Nation. I guess I have many different jobs there at the agency as a mental health counselor. We have a program called Healing the Wounded Spirit, and also have program directors of our fatherhood program. We have a fatherhood male involvement youth program for girls and boys. We have, like MILPA has up here, we have a Círculo for Hombres and a Círculo for Mujeres, for men, healing circle, and a woman's healing circle. So, you know, I was invited here by Juan Gomez. We had planned for many years. He had invited me to this area. I do have some history here in the Salinas Valley, beautiful, beautiful country. Came through here when I was a teenager. Really glad to be back in a different way of teaching, using Native American Indian methodologies or traditional ways in healing. And had a wonderful day of teaching of the healing with the dream catcher, and also using some hand weavings to make some belts or sashes, also bands that we use at our Hombres Retiro and Mujeres Retiro. So that's kind of a synopsis of who I am and what I do. Back home, they call me a Kona, which commonly a lot of people, I help people. I'm a helper. Some people would say a medicine man. I don't call myself that, but I come from a long line of people that do that type of work. So I'm also the spiritual leader for our nation, for our 5 tribes under the Huahutecan Nation, and also a head of my bear clan. I'm a bear dancer from our area, and a really big connection with the bear dancers out here in California. So just really good to be home. I like coming home. I feel a connection between Texas and California. A lot of Tejanos out here. It's amazing how many people have roots in Texas.
So you stated that you came over here to kind of give us a dream catcher workshop, healing with the dream catcher. And I'd like to ask you to please explain from your perspective and your experience working with these ways, how important is that, and how does that help to address this susto or trauma as we know it, like technically, medically?
Well, the dreamcatcher, it has its origins come from the northern Indians, the Delaware, the Winnebago. Now they call them the Whole Chunk. And in those areas, the dream catcher was made by family members and put on a cradle board for children, because children coming from the spirit world, a lot of times they'll have dreams, they'll have what you call nightmares, and then later on, as people get older, they have these bad dreams that people call nightmares. And what the dream catcher intent is the maker makes the dream catcher and puts some intentions in there, and maybe some protection, invoking some sayings, specially designed for that person. And then the dream catcher, it resembles a web, which grandmother spider. There's a lot of stories about the spider, and how usually around this time you'll see a lot of spiders spinning their webs, and how it has a connection, that each one of those strands make a connection. And then what happens is that dream catcher is put above the person's head, where they lay their head in their bed or their headboard, up on the wall. And what happens is the nightmares get caught in the web, and a little hole is constructed in the middle of the dream catcher to allow the good dreams, or the good parts of the dreams, to go through. And then once a moon cycle, the dream catcher is taken outside and shaken, because it gets full. It gets full with dreams that are bad. And then a lot of times they'll bless it with incense, like sage, or over a fire, and they'll reinstall it over the headboard. I've also used this with veterans, men and women that have served in foreign wars and have had traumatic experiences, people that have had trauma. A lot of times I will have the actual couple, the man and wife, or the person that the veteran connects to, could be a relative, and they make the dream catcher together. And it's interesting how you have these two people putting all the intentions and finding out how to construct it, and it becomes theirs. It's different than going to a truck stop and buying one, made in Hong Kong, so to speak. But this one is like made with natural fibers, and it becomes theirs. Tokens can be put on there, like a picture of the person, a lock of hair, maybe some feathers that they find at a retreat or something. And it becomes a healing agent for them. And a lot of times these dreams stop, these bad dreams stop, and help them cope. And so it's a coping piece. I think nowadays we're going back to the old ways. A lot of times we're finding out that Western methodologies have their place, but I find out that some of the ways that we have, things that people would sing to us or rock us to sleep, or do that roo. We find out that that's an ancient chant for healing. And I think that we've always had those memories, those ancient memories. And then when you make the dream catcher, just like some of the young men and women that were doing it today, they were talking about connecting, talking about how they're always, plugged into the electronic world, and here they're doing something that's old. You could call it a craft, but really they're finding out it's more than just a craft. And I think when you're working with your hands, that's connected to the brain, I think it really helps you bring a little bit of stress reliever. It helps you kind of escape for a little bit and concentrate on something that's very almost childlike, because you're learning to do things. That's what we do with children. We teach them to do things with their hands, how to set up blocks, how to play. And I think as adults we get too serious and we forget to do some of that. So it's something that can be constructed, and something that can be used as a healing agent.
As an elder, what do you feel your role is in supporting the next generation?
In our context, particularly back home, when you reach the age of 50, you become this golden ager. Not necessarily an elder, because there's two different contexts. You could be just an elderly person. But the title of elder, it takes on a responsibility of how you live, how you compart yourself, how you share your stories, your wisdom to others. I feel myself in the winter of my life I'm 60 years old. It'd be a blessing to have 10 more, 20, maybe even 30 more years, maybe even be a centennial, live to be 100. But we know that our time is short. So being able to share stories, share wisdom, share experiences. A lot of times, even counseling. A lot of times people think that they go to counseling to get quote unquote advice, or go to an elder for advice. And I think when you give advice, it's very dangerous. Some people say, well, should I stay together with this woman or should I leave this man? And you give advice, and they make a decision based on your advice, and it goes bad for them. You're responsible for that. What I usually share a story. I'll share a story of an experience, maybe another story that someone has shared for me, so they can come up with a solution that's their solution. Because a lot of times I come up with a solution and it could present as a problem. Somebody says, well, just stop drinking. And that person stops drinking, and then they'll say, well, you know what? It's worse now. Now that they stop drinking, it's worse. They're boring. And it's like, so usually solutions become problems. So I think that if I'm able to share some time, some patience, I'm able to reflect, give perspective, and they come up with their solutions, that's going to have some longevity. We can always tell somebody to stop drinking. It's best if they decide to do it. We can always tell somebody, hey, you need to go to counseling. It's best if they say, you know what, I think I need to go to counseling. Because that's going to have some long-lasting effects on them because they decided to do it. And I think that a lot of us have solutions in our heads for our family members, or even our community. There's a lot of solutions in the nation right now that people are coming up with these solutions. Hey, if we only had this, if we only had clean water for everybody, that would be the solution to disease. Well, then we find out, okay, so how are we going to distribute that? How are we going to keep the water pure? So we really have to think about it. I think that's where the elder part comes, that you don't just throw out a solution. You kind of, we have a campaign back home called Dare to Listen. We need to dare to listen to other people, other cultures, other contexts. And I think if I can share that with others, that's what an elder does. I'm a guide. I'm a storyteller. I'm a human being. And if I can show this tolerance, and I think that's what's happened with me. I read Mark Twain one time, and he wrote something that said, in travel, you learn tolerance. I really believe that, because being the way that I look, people see me, they see my braided hair, traditional way, they see me wearing earrings, maybe some native jewelry. People, make comments, people say, hey, Tano, where's the Lone Ranger? I mean, even at this day and age, you hear that. So I've grown to be very tolerant. I've grown to rewire that in my head. I hear that and I said, well, that person obviously doesn't know or hasn't been taught, or like they say in Spanish, no está bien educado. They're not educated in being a good human being. I think when we see that, when we hear that, I know when I was younger, I wouldn't react that way. But now that I'm an old man, I don't react like I used to. So I think that's what we call that wisdom. And I've even seen wisdom in young people. I've heard some very young, wise people. Some of the people here at the MILPA, some of the things that I'm hearing, it's like I'm learning from them. So I think that if we're dare ourselves to listen, if we invite each other to consider some things, I think we can have a better time as human beings. I think we can help our families, and I also think that we can also impact our community and the nation.
As we were sitting in Círculo earlier, you shared a story with us about an interaction with a black man that you were working with, and I don't want to get too much into it. I'm going to ask you to please share it for the people. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is because in these times of Black Lives Matter, Brown Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, you see the potential for these rifts, for these divisions, and we're living in a society in which we've been separated far too much. And I felt that was a real humbling and real eye-opening story of why we're connected.
One of my first jobs when I got out of the Marine Corps, I was a mechanic, or really a gas attendant. So I filled up the garbage trucks with propane and diesel and gas, and that was like my first entry-level job. And the tower man, it was a black African brother. He was, he was really something else. He was a really neat guy, and he had a lot of wisdom. So mainly there was, we had, Caucasian mechanics, we had, predominantly Latino mechanics, all different ages, younger, elders, and people would, they would use some racial slurs. I'm not going to repeat them, but they would say racial slurs, and he would say, hey, you know what? You may not know this, but we're related, cuz, and I would listen to him, and then of course they didn't understand what he was saying. Then he said, you're making fun of my race, but we're probably related. And they would say, no, that's impossible. That's impossible. This is 1980. 1980, he's saying this. But this gentleman was way ahead. Now we have, scientific DNA proof that leads us all the way back, our DNA as a human race, back to Mother Africa, where they call her Eve, was a black woman that came out and the beginning of the human race, thousands and thousands of years ago. So here's a man with no scientific, education whatsoever, other than saying that we're all human beings and we're probably related. So, even amongst the Native American Indian community, when the American Indians were, strangers were coming, the Europeans, the French, the English, the Spanish, and also bringing over black African slaves, and not only to the shores of America, but the shores of Mexico, the shores of South America, and within these plantations, many of the slaves would run away. So they would run away into the wilderness, into the most desolate areas where a lot of the European explorers wouldn't even venture. So who was there other than the Native American Indian? Every different tribe, whether it be federally recognized, state recognized, reservation, community, tribal, band, pueblo, there is a pocket of what we will call the red black man, and it's there. And it goes to a lot of stories. There's a medicine wheel that you can go online and you put the word medicine wheel, and you'll see this round circle divided into four with a white, a red, black, and a yellow piece, which in essence it's the four nations, that represent, the yellow represents the Asian, the Middle Eastern, the red represents the American Indian, the Chicano, the Pacific Islander, the Alaskan, the black African, and then the white, the Caucasian, European, Icelandic, Norwegian, British human beings, so a lot of Native American stories talk about how we were one at one time. And now we've traveled the earth, so now we're mixing, we're blending, because you cannot help falling in love with people from other ethnicities, other cultures, other races. You just can't. You can't, and I think it's a natural thing to do. And I think that the more that we research our past in this family tree, this human family tree, how much we're related to other races, you know. And I see that as a beautiful thing, you know. We got people that have different colors of hair, different textures, different eye colors, and I think that, you know, like Martin Luther King said that there'll be a day that you will not be judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character.
Thank you for sharing that with us once again. So, and I know that you don't get to be an elder, but like you said, making that distinction between an elderly person and an elder, you don't get to where you're at in this life, in this journey, by not having kind of paid your dues, if you will. And so just to kind of like put that stamp on the validity of your words, of you, of your participation in the movimiento, I want to provide you a brief little outlet to maybe describe some of the protests or acts of resistance that you had been involved in or your people were involved in.
Well, you know, I know in our part of the world, you know, in Texas, in Tejas, you know, for a long time, people would say, well, there's no American Indians in Texas. They're all dead. You know, there's a lot of concepts like that, you know. And it's just like me. I thought that Indian country was this big, vast area, you know. But in my travels, I find out that Indian country is very, very small. Little small pockets of communities and reservations and pueblos. And in the context of our area, you know, what happened was what happened with a lot of parts of the world, including the Western Hemisphere. You know, it's divided by, in history, it was divided by the Portuguese and the Spanish, and that's why you have people in the Western Hemisphere speaking both of those languages. The colonization, and particularly for us, you know, when the strangers came, they brought the Spanish and they colonized us. They had us build missions. A lot of us resisted. Some of us ran away. But we maintained our lifeways. We kept them hidden. A lot of cultures did that. Same way with the black African American. He had his culture. He kept it hidden. You know, he kept it. You know, he would comply, but it was a way of them. You know, like you said, this resistance to leave those old ways. I mean, there's countless of history. For American Indians, it could be the boarding schools that because the philosophy was a good Indian is a dead Indian, and then the philosophy changed was kill the Indian inside, save the man or save the child. And for us, that's what the mission system was for us. You know, I often think about what it was like for our ancestors, that they would be woken in the middle of the night by the bell to send them to labor, to the labores, to tend the fields, to tend the livestock. What it was like for them to live, you know, free, you know, under the sky and sleep under the stars and live on what the Great Spirit provided, and moving into four walls and a roof. And I often think about that. But many of us, you know, there's countless of documentation that the Spanish would write that these Indians, these salvajes, they don't want to leave their ways, you know. They go to their mitotes. We're having so much trouble with them. And it's documented, particularly in our area. You know, we have our tribal members are anthropologists, and they have access to the archives, and we've been able to find our lineal history, and that was the main thing at that time. And what we would do, they would run away, you know, and the friars and the soldiers would wake up, and there's nobody at the missions, you know. So the stories say that we would go out and we would be out there in the wilderness and having our ceremonial ways, living the old way, and then we would come back. Of course, the friar. I mean, I'm sure he'd be upset, but who's going to tend his fields? Who's going to grind his corn and his grain? So, and I think that's how we were able to survive our old ways. We're able to keep our language intact. These words that we have, they're not really Spanish. They're Indian words. There was no words for some of the things that we had. So I think that that's a way that's an ancient resistance that's still alive today. So we're trying to teach our children, no, this is not San Antonio, Texas. This is Yanaguana, and no, this is not the Alamo. This is San Antonio de Valero, commonly known as the Alamo. So we're rewording, we're rerouting, we're bringing back the old ways because we know that's what's going to help our next 7 generations. Right now there's a lot of unity, and there's a lot of resistance to some of the things that are happening. It has to do with the preservation of our Mother Earth. We don't consider that an important thing. Our water, our air, the earth, and our seeds. There's going to be a time where that's going to be a very big, and even today, I mean, like you go to the grocery store, you see these eggs and they are huge. You see the chickens that you buy, and they're huge. Now we're finding out. We're finding out the truth. We're finding out the truth. That's all these medicines that they're putting into them. So I can see this big movement for organic food, cage-free chickens, a lot of our elders, that are retired, they raise their own chickens, they grow their own food, they catch their own water, they reuse water. So I think there's a big movement for this conservation, that we need to take care of this earth, And I think that gets lost in the shuffle. I think something as important as that, So myself, I think Indian people, native indigenous people, see an invisible world that other people don't see. You're going down the highway 101, and all of a sudden you see this hawk fly over. For another person, non-native, it's just a bird, or was that a for an indigenous person, oh, look what the Creator just had me see. Look at that beautiful creature. I've just been blessed, So it's like we have a different vision of the world. Even something as minute as an ant, we see the connection. That's our relative. And they're reminders of us, of what we're doing and how we're living. So I really think that that's part of the resistance, of like, hey, there's a story that comes from up north about jumping mouse, and it's a long story. But in essence, either you could just be like the other mice, and just collecting grain and just living in the grasses, or you could be like jumping mouse that ventured across the grasses, across the river, across the prairies, into the mountains, and became an eagle. That transformation. And I think that that's what a lot of people, for a long time have been, just in the day-to-day stuff and not thinking about, there's got to be more. I got to be doing something, and that's what I'm. It's like I'm thinking about. I needed, like today. I wanted to teach all of the young men and the young women here something very simple. They had a different concept. I put up an agenda, and just like you do for any workshop. But You know, I didn't follow the agenda. You know, I told stories. I played music. We ate, and you know, that's how it should be. You know, I think that we get caught in, like they say in my time, I'll date myself, we get caught in this rat race, and we don't smell the coffee. You know, we don't smell the roses. We don't take time to do that. You know, we don't smell our fruit. We just bite into it. You know, we don't take time to, you know, it's something like when you smell a child. You know, you have a baby that has a certain smell. And you smell that child. Oh, I love how they smell. You know, and I think that we don't do enough of that. So our senses, our sight, our hearing, our touch, our taste, is something that tells us that we're alive. You know, there's some people that don't have that. You know, and I think if we keep that in perspective, we'll see how blessed we are.
Thank you a lot for that. So I know you said you really kind of deviate from providing words of advice, but as far as like MILPA is concerned, when you think about us right here at MILPA and your nephew Juan, you know, what type of encouragement or words of like maybe some forewarning can you provide us with to conclude this brief podcast?
I think you have to have balance. Along with the days that you're out, like I hear the word, you guys are out in the trenches, working with the homeless. You know, you're out looking for funds. You're traveling. You're speaking. Take time to do what we did today. You know, gather, have a circle, a healing circle, tell a story, bring a teaching, learn something to do with your hands. And then, because what you guys are doing is like you're healing the community, and in essence, you're kind of healing yourself, but you also have to heal the healer. You know, if you're in that job of being this healing agent, you need to take care of yourself. So what does that mean? That means that you're getting enough rest, that you're taking care of your family, that you schedule things that, okay, a good family time, that your mind is not still over here at work. Because now that we are so electronic, people are working there on their phone and there's at their child's birthday party. So you can easily get distracted and thinking that, oh, no, I have to save the world. No, I have to leave the birthday party because one of our clients just, and you know what? That's one of the things that I see people, a lot of them do, and the longevity of that is very short. You have to take care of yourself. You have to know when to say, okay, because when we deal with people that are codependent, we can become codependent also. Then we start looking for solutions in different ways. You know, we start to self-medicate. We start smoking. We start drinking. We start, doing things that we're not supposed to. And I think that that's one of the things that in this line of work you need to do. You need to have fun. You need to go and, go see a play, go write something, paint, work with clay, garden, whatever you can do to rejuvenate yourself. Take a walk. We're listening to this young man that went and took this hike up in Yosemite. Those are the things that get you connected with, with this word, rejuvenate yourself. Because that's where we started. We started out there in the wilderness. So when we're in the wilderness, what was our worries? Okay, I got to get water, I got to get shelter, I've got to make some tools, I've got to watch out for the bear or watch out for the lion, I've got to be safe, and it was, a level of stress, but it was different than what is today. We get in the car, we're stressed out about that. We can't even go to a parking lot because somebody cuts us off. Too many people at the cash register, and then it just gets, unhealthy. So I really think that, you have to be able to, have either yourself or someone to tell you, hey, and those are the things that you put in your life, whether it's going to a counselor, doing something that's faith-based, doing something that's, like a lot of people go ceremony. But in itself, you can get lost in that. You can go to so many ceremonies, you can go to so many runs and so many hikes that, okay, now you've lost. So it's a balance. You've got to balance it, I think people nowadays don't know how to sit still. I challenge people, sit there for 15 minutes and don't move. Let's see if you can do that. I'm going to sit here for 15 minutes. I'm not going to answer my phone. I'm just going to sit here and meditate or just, unplug. And we don't do that. We don't do that, And I think that the more that we are able to do that, the more, better of a human being we're going to be for ourselves, a lot healthier. And I think I think for a lot of us, the stress can kill us. So the stress of this job, it can be harmful. So you got to do things, you got to, include your family schedule. My wife and I, we keep a calendar, and family events, things that if I'm gonna be out of town, what are we gonna do? I learned how to, I'm not really good on technology, but young people at my age as me showed me how to Skype, so I Skype and I can see my wife's face, things like that I can use the technology to, be present, and I think that the more that we're able to do that, I think this agency is going to be successful. I think you have a lot of talented people. I mean, you've got interns that want to be, involved with you. I don't think there's any accidents. I think you're in the right place at the right time. And I even think the word of your agency, MILPA, I mean, I think about, how my grandmother, they came from sharecropping out in Hondo, where they had these big fields and they would raise sheep and goats and chickens, to when she came into the city of San Antonio in the 30s, in the Depression. And she had like a little farm. She had chickens, she had goats, she had, garden. And I think that I used to think that she was real backward, but in essence, I mean, she was way ahead. She knew that those were the things that she needed to have, and my grandfather made sure, you know, that she had her little milpa, that she had her corn, that she had her her herbs, that she had fresh chickens, fresh eggs, things like that. That I feel like I want to do that. I want to raise my own food. I want to. And, there's a lot of people that start out in the corporate world and they end up going to that direction. Why? It's because they finally figure out, like, why am I doing this? They feel that it's connected to something that's not good. So we all look for, I guess, that salvation, that rejuvenation. And I think if you incorporate that here, like we did today, I think that you're going to have a lot of longevity. You're going to affect a lot of communities. Especially at this time, what's going on with our nation. I think you're going to affect even your children. They come into a place that's safe. They come into a place that their senses, are alive. I can hear in the background over here, and I think that that's something that we need. We are a human being that functions as a group. We function as a collective. So I think if we do more of that, I think if you guys do more of that, it's like back home, we make a point of getting collaboratives, of getting partners. You know, we find this one guy that has a company that makes chili. So at all our events, we make sure that we sell his chili. You know, and he'll donate some of it. And so then or he'll sponsor it. You know, and in turn he wants us to help. We help him. So I think that if we go to that type of system, you know, bartering, using social media, it makes our job easier. You know, I think like we're taking pictures of, you know, so we're going to put that on social media so other people, hey, look what MILPA's doing, you know, wow, we need to do that too, you know. And I think that that's going to, you know, that in itself is a teaching, that in itself is an example. Hey, we need to do that. Because we can get lost. We can get lost, and that's one thing that I want to do. You know, I paint, I write, I love my grandchildren, I love being with my wife, you know. I love sitting there and having these deep conversations with her, you know. And when I was a young man, we couldn't do that. We're too busy, you know, raising the children, picking them up from this, taking them over there. And now is that, you know, in the winter of our life, we're really enjoying ourselves, you know. We're traveling. Sometimes we have to tell our kids, hey, we're leaving. We're not going to be back. You need to find somebody to take care of the kids, but we'll be back. And it's great. It's great to enjoy life, you know.
So, Maestro Isaac, we cannot even begin to articulate or express the amount of gratitude that we feel right here at the MILPA office, sharing space with you, just listening to you. You know, my daughters, my son, they were this morning when I got dropped off and they saw you, they rode off screaming, Papa Bear, Papa Bear. You know, so very, very thankful, very humbled, very hopeful for the future. And I hope you all enjoyed this pretty lengthy podcast, netcast, whatever you want to call it. Please feel free to go ahead and look us up on our Facebook page, like our channel, like us on the Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, however you may feel that you could participate in the movement. I hope. I'm Mateo.
What would you say to people who are thinking about coming out here to help, but they're on the fence about it?
Tell them to come. Fight your warrior spirit and get here.